be an obvious choice for the ordinary conjurer to be using, until they became mass-marketed.
This is 53 different symbols that everybody recognizes in a very tight little container that slips into my pocket. There we go. Playing cards are fascinating. Fortunes have been won and lost. Loves have come and gone on the turn of a single card. There's a mystery and enchantment to playing cards in and of themselves.
To be honest, the greatest thing about cards is that they're readily available to a young magician who, in his sort of early teens, wants to be able to do magic tricks. Everyone has a pack of cards at home, and so you can go and start learning tricks instantly without having to go and spend lots of money at magic shops. People can associate with them, and they know that what you're doing is actually based on your ability or your sleight of hand rather than on a trick prop.
The playing cards became an important tool of magic in lots of sort of different routes. First of all, they were universally known. Worldwide, they were known. And they were known as a gambling device.
This association with gambling made cards so disreputable that the church tried to ban them, and card magicians were often confused with card sharps. And no identity was more obscure than that of the greatest card cheat of them all.
The Expert at the Card Table was written in 1902 by a man called S.W. Erdnase. It's a unique book and is generally regarded to be one of the most important books on magic and also card cheating. As far as one can tell, no one has ever existed with the name Erdnase. It doesn't take much detective work to realise that if you read the name backwards, it spells out E.S. Andrews. So a lot of people have assumed that somebody by that name, or at least with the surname Andrews, was the author of this mysterious book. It's not surprising if you're writing a book that explains how you cheat at cards that you might want to keep your identity secret. There have been all sorts of theories about who this mysterious Mr. Andrews was. One of the most prevalent theories is that he was a Mr. Milton Franklin Andrews, who was around at the turn of the century, the early 1900s, who was well known as being a card cheat at the time. However, there have been a lot of other theories, and if I'm totally honest, I'm not entirely convinced when one looks more carefully at the evidence about Milton Franklin Andrews. The truth is that nobody actually knows who wrote the book, and it may well be that he never wanted anyone to find out who he was, and we'll never know. Erdnase in his book talks about dealing from the bottom of the pack and says that this is one of the most important moves that any card cheat needs to be able to master. Of course, the difficulty is that whenever the cards are cut, as they are in any game, then those cards that were on the bottom end up in the middle of the pack. And for that reason, people have worked out ways of dealing not from the bottom, but rather from the middle of the pack of cards. So just to show you what I mean, supposing one of those aces is in the middle of the pack, and in fact let's put another one of the aces in somewhere else as well. We could do this, in fact let's do it with all of the aces like this, so they go in different parts of the pack like this. I hope that you can see that they really are randomly spaced out in different parts of the middle of the pack. It is, however, possible to control more or less where those go and to keep a fairly good idea of where they are, so that when the cards are dealt out, for instance, if there are 5 players, when I deal a card to myself, I'm actually not dealing a card from the top of the pack, I'm dealing a card from deep within the middle of the pack. So it's possible to do this even with one hand like this. You actually then deal to yourself all 4 of those aces. Most of the card cheating that would have gone on, and that I'm sure does still go on, would happen in private games. Now obviously if you're going to control the card, you need to be able to control it even when the cards are shuffled. And there are lots of different ways by which cards are shuffled. Obviously people in casual games will sort of generally shuffle the cards in this sort of a manner. Sometimes you get people who do these slightly flashier shuffles like this, sort of a waterfall type of shuffle. All of those are perfectly acceptable in most games of cards. Of course, in a casino or a more formal environment, a dealer generally shuffles like this. This is a more standard on-the-table shuffle and a series of cuts. Nevertheless, despite all this shuffling and cutting, it's actually possible to keep track of where that card that we started off with is. So I've managed to keep the Ace of Spades under my control throughout. Of course, as well as shuffling the cards, when the cards run past, it's also possible to see some of the other cards as well. So it's then possible to put them into a particular order, to rearrange those cards. Just to show you what I mean, if I stop that halfway through, you'll see here the way the cards are interwoven together. It's not a perfect shuffle, they don't alternate exactly, but they nevertheless are in a particular order. And the advantage of putting them in a particular order is it will enable me to keep control not only of the ace of spades that I've got here, but if I spread the cards out, also the 2, 3, 4, 5, in fact all of the spades, all the hearts, all the clubs and all of the diamonds, every one of those cards in perfect order.
Both the card cheat and the honest magician require extreme dexterity. Something very hard to imagine in the case of the next magician to follow Fawkes as an international star.
Another magician that was around roughly the same time as Isaac Fawkes was a guy called Matthew Bouchinger, and he was kind of memorable as a magician for slightly different reasons to Isaac Fawkes.
The thing that stands out about Matthew is that he didn't have any arms and he didn't have any legs. And that kind of makes you stand out in a crowd.
He was 29 inches high.
According to records, he had what can best be described as flippers. And with it, he managed to be amazingly dexterous.
Even though he didn't have fingers, he could do sleight-of-hand magic. The kind of mind boggles. And he was great at drawing as well. He used to make these portraits made out of tiny letters.
On one particular occasion, he spends 15 months drawing a picture in which he includes, I think it's the Lord's Prayer, in the hairstyle. I don't even know how that would work. I don't even know what kind of brain that would say that, here's a good idea. I'm going to draw someone, and in the curls of their hair, I shall insert the Lord's Prayer. As far as magic is concerned, he learns to do magic. He does coin tricks and card tricks, and very famously does the cups and balls trick.
Like Fawkes, the little man performed in taverns and private parties. These enclosed spaces allowed magicians to control their environment.
It is known that he had a bit of an entourage with him, so, you know, maybe you get this picture of him kind of sat on a table, all 29 inches of him, and lots of people underneath operating contraptions. Who knows?
He produces not only balls, but he also produces small hens, livestock from under his cups. It's very impressive.
It wasn't just your standard freak. He actually got invited to perform at sort of royal banquets, noblemen's houses, and he is basically, you know, a toast of society.
People are drawn to the strange and the unusual. And I think that that was a big plus for Matthew.
The little man was astonishing because even without hands, he still excelled at the other fundamental magician skill, sleight of hand.
When you think about a magician, you think about him pulling a coin from behind the ear. Well, that's sleight of hand. A very basic thing would be to hide something in your hand. You take your hand and you hide something using the muscles to hold it in position in a non-obvious way. Bad magicians are really obvious because they sort of walk up to you and they go, hello, and they have their hands in a sort of weird position that makes you look like you've got sort of arthritis or something like that, and so strange, you know, trying to look natural. So the ability to hold sort of 20 cards in a hand and make them appear one by one is technically sleight of hand.
It's things with everyday objects that the magician himself makes happen. You take a rubber band just like this, and I'll break it, okay? And then you just put it back together like this. That's organic magic, sleight of hand with everyday objects.
Take a hanky, you push it into your fist, it's the simplest trick in the world, and you go, way, it changes into an egg, okay? Not good, but quick. Now what we've done is combine sleight of hand with something which is called a gimmick, or a fake, because it's not a real egg. Okay, a fake is something that looks real but it's not, and it's spelled F-E-K-E, sort of magician's terminology. A gimmick is a kind of hidden bit of equipment that you don't see at all that helps you do the trick. And it's the combination of these things that does it. Now, I'll show you that again because the other element you need to use is presentation, obviously, the whole showmanship thing. So I'll show you how this works. That goes in there, so when I pick up the hanky, what that is a big move to cover the small move. Okay, now so that pushes in there, also you're showing that hand empty, also good psychologically. You push it inside the fist, but obviously into the egg, so you're combining sleight of hand with the fake, and then you show it's changed into an egg. Now obviously you keep the hole to the back, that's the important thing. That's actually a fake as well, because that whole explanation was kind of a gimmick to help me get away with this, which was misdirection, making you think it was a plastic egg, when in fact it's a real one. That's misdirection.